So, what are you drinking today? Well, I am drinking a Lady Grey tea. It's a tea that a friend has kindly gifted me in one of the letters that she wrote me, and I'm drinking it out of a cup that she also gave me. I'm drinking Lady Grey today because I feel like it really is the tea of choice of one of the characters in one of the books that I read this month. Imagine it's 4 a.m. New Year's Eve and you realize that you should probably go home. And then the next day you wake up and you're dead tired, but you still want to read something. I will personally then choose to go and read a graphic novel because those are just a little bit easier to read, in my opinion. You can also look at the images if you're getting lost a little bit. So the first book that I read in January was Paper Girls, the complete story. And the story is written by Nghi Vaughan and the illustrator is Chiang. The story of Paper Girls follows four 12-year-old girls who are working as newspaper delivery girls, and they kind of stumble into this time traveling adventure. We meet Erin, who just it's her first day on the job, and she wakes up super early in the morning to deliver her newspapers, and she meets three other girls, those being Mac, KJ, and Tiff. They decide to group together, and it's a really good decision that they do that because not short after this grouping, one of the girls gets attacked by a group of teenagers and her walkie-talkies get stolen. It should be noted that this is set in the 80s, so they have walkie-talkies instead of mobile phones. The group of girls chases after these teenagers, but they stumble upon some weird machine in a basement, and that happens to be a time machine. And after discovering this time machine, they kind of just tumble from world to world, from time period to time period, and they're just trying to get home, but they're so wrapped up all of a sudden in this time war that they almost need to finish it, even though they just stumbled upon it and are not a big part of this time war. I really thought the style of illustration and just the coloring was really well done. The coloring is credited to be done by Matt Wilson, and these are stunning pieces. Like, you can tell the different time periods and the different worlds apart from one another, which is a very important thing to do when you are talking about a time traveling story like this. All the images were just pieces of art that you can put on your wall, which those are the best graphic novel books in my opinion. The story was really interesting as well. I liked all of the characters. Like, the four main girls were all really interesting. Maybe KJ and Tiff could be a little bit more fleshed out, but you could tell that all of the girls had their own motivations and aspirations for the future. And at a certain point, I don't really remember if it's KJ or Tiff. I think Tiff realizes that she is attracted to girls and that she even kisses her friend Mac, and she just tries to grapple with it while at the same time also still grappling with the fact that they just this morning were just about to deliver newspapers like any normal day. Mac as well, she learns that she dies from this mysterious cancer in the future, and she tries everything to fix that and get herself back to health. And then it turns out that she has a cancer that's specific to time travelers, and that there is no cure for it, even though in the future they did find a cure for the normal kind of cancer. But aside from these four main characters, we meet a lot of other characters, including like future versions of people. Or maybe I really don't know. I get Tiff and KJ a bit muddled because they could have used a bit more fleshing out, even though they were really well fleshed out, but they weren't Erin and Mac, if that makes sense. But Erin and one of the other girls meet their futures, and it's just really really interesting in how these young girls learn about themselves in the future. With Aaron, that's also the first character or the future version that you meet. So it's like just like a really normal person that just grew up and has lost a bit of hope throughout the way. But then I have to look this up. Either KJ or Tiff's future persona is just a completely different person, and that I thought that was a really well done thing, because I kind of, with meeting Aaron, I thought, oh, we're gonna meet like every future version, and then when meeting new characters, I was like, oh, this is a future version of this character, but it wasn't always. So meeting another future version and that being a punk rock person and just being so completely different was really really cool. But at a certain point, I did find the story to become quite repetitive, or it is more of an episodic graphic novel, so it's not just, there is one main story, but it's just told in different volumes. I think there are 6 volumes, and every volume would start out with the girls just landing in a different situation. And I think if the graphic novels would have become comics and would have been published like monthly or something, which may have also happened, I'm not really sure, it would feel more like a monster of the week type-esque situation, rather than these 4 girls trying to get home and just being wrapped up in this kind of, in just the time war that was going on. Luckily, I started kind of getting bored with the repetitiveness around the last volume, so it really wasn't that big of a deal. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was a genre that I have never really heard of before, but I should read more. The genre that was credited to this book is called solar punk, so maybe I should try to find more books of this genre. I've been thinking of doing more genre reads, like trying to pick out a genre and then reading like a couple of books from that genre, because I find myself really now getting swept into reading just one genre, which I don't really want to do. I want to read all the genres and books from all over the world. So if you have any tips of interesting genres, they are always welcome. So the book that I'm talking about that is the genre solar punk is A Psalm for the Wild Build, which is written by Becky Chambers. So this book is about sibling decks, and they are a tea monk. And tea monks in this world are meant to just make tea out of their little I forgot the word, but their cart, and have people come over and they drink tea and they talk about their issues and just like their hardships, and the tea monks are there to really help you through it. And Sibling Dex is really looking for a purpose, more or less, so they leave the convent quite out of the blue, and their other siblings are like, oh, are you sure you want to do this, because you never really had training and you never went alongside one of the other monks. And Dex is like, no, I gotta do this on my own. So they go out to a little village and they start building up, and it's a really cute description of how sibling Dex kind of organizes their like tea station. But then they realize that they really aren't ready for this. They just haven't trained enough. But then someone comes and they can be helpful, and then over time they learn the trick of the trade, I think is what you call it. So they get really good at it, at doing the tea monk thing, and they collect more teas over time, they collect more mugs over time, more different types of things that you need for your tea. But at a certain point they realize that it isn't everything they've always wanted. Even though they travel from city to city to bring people tea, there's just something still lacking, and they can't really describe what it is. They just feel lost. They just feel lost. So at a certain point they decide to leave. They are not going to the next village over. They are leaving society, humanity society, and just seeing what's out there. They want to go somewhere they've never been. So they go to in my head it was kind of like a desert thing situation in between regions of human places, and that's where they meet a robot. The robot is called Splendid Speckled Moss Cap, named after the first thing that the robot sees after it wakes up, which I thought was such a cool thing to have the robot characters name themselves after the first thing they see. It's like when how little babies will assume something is their parents based on the fact that it's the first thing they see. So I really like that. Moscab and Adex meet each other, and they start having these kinds of philosophical conversations, and it's really good and really really interesting conversations is what they're having. They're talking about the purpose of life. They're talking about the history of what has happened to these robots, and after they became sentient and realized that they no longer wish to work for humanity, so they just left. Like, they put down their tools and they just went into the desert and lived by themselves. And basically all of these robots want to just learn, and they just want to exist to learn things, and they want to just observe things and learn from those observations. So Mousecap is really interested in insects, but he also tells the story of a robot friend who just has been staring at the formation of stalagmites. So the story really covers a couple of themes, and most of those themes were really like, what is my purpose here? What am I to bring to this society? Dax is really struggling with trying to find this sense of belonging and trying to find joy in what they are doing. And Moscap is really just like, you can just exist. How about just existing? Not everyone needs to have a purpose. Maybe your purpose is just being there and teaching me about humans after having lost contact for over so many years. And Dex really struggles with that, and they find it hard to really understand that you don't necessarily need to have such a big purpose in life. And I think that's such a strong theme because a lot of people struggle with that. Like, if I am not doing this, then what is my life worth? What if I'm not performing this well, then what am I? And I think it's a really good book for this. Another aspect that I really really liked about this book is how it plays kind of with your expectations. When you think about robots, you think about like those clunky robots that just move like this and they talk like that. But the robots here are very fluid, and they are so closely connected to nature as well. And there's one passage in the book where they try to go to, I think, a river or like an abandoned factory place, and there's no road to that place. And Dex is like, we cannot do this. We actually, maybe we shouldn't go because there's no roads. And Moscap replies with, well, someone has to make the road. Also, why are you following rules? And I thought that was really telling of how these robots worked, because they no longer follow rules. They actually feel a bit more human than Dex is at certain times. I really, really enjoyed this book. It's a very cozy read, and I think it's just they talk about tea, or tea is an important element. I'm just there for it. So I give it 5 out of 5 stars because it's such a cozy read. It's so good, and I'm excited to read the second part. I have heard that the second book isn't as well written or isn't as good, but I'm still really excited. The third book I read is quite a well-known one. It came out, or it was published in 2025, I think, or 2024. It's a really recent novel that was published is called Mayra, written by Nicky Gonzalez. And this is, I would say, a gothic horror novel. And it's such a slow burn, but it's so good. But at the same time, I kept being like, oh yeah, I can tell why some people wouldn't like this, which kind of sucks. So Mayra is told from the point of view of Ingrid, and Ingrid used to be best friends with Mayra during high school. And there's this little bit of obsession even that Ingrid talks about that may also have been a lesbian crush before realizing that it was something of a romantic crush. But the two girls have kind of lost touch over time as Mayra has left her hometown, Hialeah, which is a Cuban neighborhood, which Ingrid is still kind of mourning, also because she's a little bit stuck in time. She wasn't really able to do her studies because of money issues, and she's just not really doing anything aside from having her job, but she just stayed stagnant more or less, while to her it felt like Mayra was just moving on and living her best life. But at a certain point, Mayra calls and invites Ingrid for a little getaway for just the weekend. What turns out to be longer than a weekend. So Ingrid takes her up on this invitation and she meets Mayra and Myra's new boyfriend, and they just spend their nights talking together, rekindling, trying to clear up some issues that may have occurred over time, and just dining lavishly. And they kind of start to lose reality. They start to lose track of time. And as a reader, you're like, hey, hasn't it been 5 days? A week? You said you were only going there for a weekend? And that's really where the gothic mystery starts of how is it that Ingrid and Mayra and the boyfriend are just losing track of time. And there's just some mystery to uncover, but it's really still in the background because the characters are more important. It's really about this relationship between Ingrid and Mayra, and especially how Ingrid has remembered it and how it may not have been entirely the truth. It's just how Ingrid has remembered it. But then slowly over time, she also starts to lose some memories, and Mayra as well, and they get really stressed out about losing memories. And there's this scene where at a gas station, before Ingrid goes up to the house, she buys this little plush and she's like, oh, I'll give it to Mayra, and if she doesn't like it, I'll just give it to someone else. But then later in the house, she finds this plush again and she does not remember how it got there, which, ooh, spooky. I personally love it so much when the house is the haunting is what is doing the haunting rather than the ghosts that are living in the house. There isn't any presence of any ghosts in that house. The house is just has been built up by itself. It's building itself up to kind of lure these people in. And Myra's boyfriend has found this house, and ever since he started this relationship with the house, he's been trying to lure people into the house. And that's where they start to lose track of who they are, who they lose their memories. And we only really start to discover this and how the house works after Ingrid finds this diary. And Ingrid has this really interesting relationship with the diary because she reads it and she's like, oh yeah, this is really interesting. And then she even tries to add some of her own diary entries. But then at a certain point, after finishing this book, she's just like, no, this has been a prank. This is not real. And I think that's a really good part. Even though it's so much exposition, it's still clouded in this mystery, and especially in the way Ingrid responds to this diary, and to the diary basically screaming at her face, hey, if you don't get out, this is what's gonna happen to you. It still takes Ingrid quite a long time after finishing that diary to realize what is actually going on and how this house is actually consuming them, both her and Mayra. But still, at the forefront, at the theme of this book, is the relationship between Ingrid and Mayra. And so Ingrid tries to also save Mayra from this house, and she tries to explain what is going on and what has happened. But at the end, Ingrid has to let Mayra go. And I think at that point, Ingrid lets Mayra go even more than what she had to do between high school and now. This book was so well written. It's also quite scary, but only below the surface. Like, really, if you read in between the lines, that's where the scary place is. But then again, for Ingrid and Mayra and the boyfriend, it's the same case. For them, it's just rekindling. And it's about reshaping their relationship and talking about the relationship that they had. And they are not realizing that the house is consuming them. And same for the reader. You are at first just, you are noticing these things. But it's more subconsciously, you're like, oh, that's weird. Don't, no, don't go into the house. So I get that for some people, they may have had a bit of a hard time getting through it, given that nothing really happens on a surface level, and yet so many things do. And I think that's really the coolest part about this book. It reminded me a lot of The Shining, but then the movie, because I haven't read The Shining yet, in that it's just a house that consumes you, similar to how Haunting of Hill House has set it up. But it's just the 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 fact that it's the house that consumes you rather than the ghosts and the fear. And I think that's such a cool trope that we are seeing more and more of. So yeah, definitely recommend reading this book. Like, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Another horror book that I read is called the Hair, the Haar, the Haar. Fun fact, in Dutch, Haar is hair. So it's written by David Sodergren. This again is a horror novel, but it's completely different from Mayra, so I really like that. It's about this very old lady, and I think we need more books where the protagonist is an old person, because they are funny, first of all, but also they have already gone through so much character development way before the book takes place. So it's an interesting character build, right? We follow this 80-year-old lady, Muriel McCar. Let's just keep it at Muriel. Because I can't write my notes. And she has always lived in this super cute, tiny Scottish fishing village called Witch Haven. But that super cute Scottish fishing village has been threatened by overseas property developments, as people want to put it all down, like flatten it all out and build a golf course on that property. Don't do that. Don't build golf courses on historical villages. I feel like it's a historical village. Luckily, what comes to rescue this mysterious fog? Now, here's where the story takes kind of a turn that I did not expect, and I really had to kind of ask myself if it was something that I enjoyed or not. This fog, the Haar, it is a well-known phenomena in Witch Haven, but then the creature that lives inside the fog is not as well known. It's still a little bit of a mystery, and people have never heard of it. But Muriel finds this creature after being beaten by a young man with his out, because he was having sex at a cave that she really loved, because she used to visit it with her husband, her late husband that has passed away. That's maybe an important thing to say. So she's beaten up and she finds this creature in the fog, and he heals her, and in turn she helps him as well by just keeping it alive in her bathtub, and it feeds on blood. It's a little bit like the plant, feed me. It is a really strong and powerful creature that, after it's able to consume the flesh of those assholes that like want to build that golf course, he is able to transform his body into that of her late husband. And Muriel just full on starts to believe that her husband has come back for her because her husband was lost at sea and they never found a body. So she just full on heartedly believes that this Haar is her husband. And she eventually even starts to accept that he is strong and powerful and can help her not lose her village. So a lot of gruesome scenes are being described where this creature finds like a man that was assigned to murder one of Muriel's neighbors, and he just gets swallowed up completely. Dick first. His last words are, "my penis." What I really loved about this was that you could really tell that David Sodergren had so much fun writing the horror parts and writing the parts where the Haar attacked all these people because of like quips like that. So I had a really good time. It was a really good audiobook to listen to when traveling back home through the snow and getting stuck. So the next book I read, I don't really remember a lot about it. So it's called Siren and written by Nghi. This is historical fiction, but I would also maybe call it like heightened realism or magic realism. There is apparently a magic system in this book, but that just went way over my head and I did not get any of that. Like there were some passages, I think the narrator starts describing how people are trading in immortality, and I thought that was just a cool way of heightening it to magic realism. But apparently there was some more changing shape shifter thing situation going on, but I did not follow that at all. It's about this character Lily Wei, and she as a very young child has always loved going to the movies. This is set in 1930s Hollywood, and she even is willing to like trade her hair for these screenings to go to. And eventually she even stumbles on a film set, and just because coincidentally the movie producers need a young child to run up to the two main actors, they just point towards her and they're like, we need this child, you go run up to those actors and ask for money. And she does, and she gets money, and it's like her first taste of fame, and she starts chasing that, and she eventually becomes quite a well-known actor. Except she is a Chinese American actress, and so a lot of the times those people would get casted as maids or just like bad characters, and Lily does not want to do that. So she eventually chooses to become the bad guy and become the monster in a lot of the movies, and she becomes a siren that eventually dies in one of the movies. She really holds her own against like all these men in Hollywood, and it's really cool to see that and to read about that, and how people are like first really hesitant and they also don't even really know how to cast her, or like in what to cast her, because she just doesn't want to be a maid, and she even takes that protection over to some of her friends and to some of her girl lovers. And I thought that was really cool to have this like, it's a dangerous world, but luckily Lily can hold her own, but this does mean that she has to become the bad guy, more or less. So she stars in these set of movies called Siren Queen, the titular movie title. And a lot of things go wrong, like a fire breaks out and one of the main cast members, the main actor, actually passes away in that fire. She runs away, she doesn't agree with a lot of the screenwriters. There's one director being hired for the last movie, and they immediately butt heads because of past differences. But she, at the same time, also meets like people that she loves through that movie. She meets this girl who's a scriptwriter, and they really hit it off. And she rekindles her relationship with a past lover. So in that way, it's really nice. And I remember, I don't I can remember a lot more than I thought. But as I was writing my notes, I was like, "What? What is this about again?" I enjoy stories that are set in old Hollywood. I think it's this setting that already has this kind of magic realism vibe. So having then apparently some magical aspects to that really heightens it, and I think that was a really good choice. I think Lily was a really good and strong character. They could have maybe done a little bit more with like the secrecy around being queer and how that relationship works in old Hollywood. Like if you're queer, and then how people would force you to marry another queer person but of the opposite gender, something like that. But I still really enjoyed this story. So the last book I read, Alex has read this and has talked excessively about this, but the, the neighbor is overpowering her and is about to choke her out. But then she gets saved by her mom, and she completely breaks his skull in the cannibalism video that they made. It's really interesting, I would say. This is just going to be my opinion and really a short synopsis. So, What Hunger is written by Catherine Dang and is another horror story. I would say horror, family horror, maybe like generational trauma horror. So, the main character and the main narrator is Ronnie Neun, and she, after losing her best friend and brother, really needs to grapple with this loss. And she also is going to high school for the first time. She's meeting new people for the first time. They're having a party, so she obviously needs to go. And that's where shit really starts to hit the fan, because she gets, and in order to protect herself and get this stupid man off her, she bites his earlobe off. She like completely rips it off. And she's so shocked that she does this that she immediately spits it out. But in the days following, she cannot stop thinking about that, and she starts craving it. She wants to chew on something similar, and she's realizing that like the food that she's eating, even though it's so closely tied to her Vietnamese family and Vietnamese identity, she just can no longer enjoy it really. But she just hyper fixates on the fact that she needs to eat raw meat, and she goes to this butcher and she revels in like biting into this raw meat, and when the blood starts seeping out and like past her mouth, and how the blood covers her hands and stuff, and she just wants more and more, and she starts even thinking about this revenge plan to completely consume basically this boy that, and he's in her class, so she can just look at him all the time. But at the same time, she learns more about her family. She learns more things about her brother that she never thought that she would learn, and she learns more about her father's past. And it all just kind of starts to unravel, especially after she learns that her brother was in a relationship with another man, that she just completely goes off. She, even though she can no longer eat this boy, she sees how her neighbors are fighting, and she immediately wants to take revenge and licks off the blood. And then we get this really long but really well written scene of Ronnie and her mom driving in a car trying to dispose of the body. And Ronnie's mom starts to explain what happened to her in the past and how she came to become a cannibal, and how maybe that explains why Ronnie has this taste for flesh. And in that aspect, I really liked it. I really like family unraveling, derailing after the loss of a child stories. Like there's a really good Dutch story called The Discomfort of Evening, written by Lucas Reineveld, and it really made me think of that. Ironically, I do believe that The Discomfort of Evening is a lot more vile than What Hunger. Like in What Hunger, you just have a couple of descriptions of how the raw meat is tasting, of how Ronnie is fantasizing about eating people. There's one scene where she's completely like becoming a vampire and just sucking on someone else's wrist and biting chunks out of his arm. But The Discomfort of Evening has a lot more scenes that are different, that are not about the same thing over and over again. And a lot more different things are happening, and those just make it so visceral and vile. And that's, I feel, like really the difference between American literature and Dutch literature. So this story is really about like how your identity can still be shaped, or like how your identity is shaped by your family's past, even though you don't really understand or know your family's past. And it's obviously about being an immigrant or a child of immigrants in America. And I think that was done really, really well. But at a certain point, it was just too many descriptions of food, and there were too many of the same descriptions of like, I want the blood to seep down my neck and stuff. And yeah, so that was a little bit, not that it was too visceral for me, like I could handle it really well. It was just like, all right, okay, we get it, you have this obsession with meat. But still, I also, those passages needed to be in that book to really hit home how much she's obsessing about it. So I can't really say like, oh, you should have kept those out. Like, no. I do, however, think that some of the scenes could have been changed up, especially when Ronnie learns about her brother's relationship with another man. Nothing really much happens to her emotionally about that. Obviously, she runs away and abandons her original plan, but then she finds her neighbors fighting, and the man is beating up his wife basically, and she does something about it. And it wasn't like the whole situation with her brother potentially being queer and always having hidden that was just thrown to the wayside. It felt a little bit like that. So I think maybe have that scene of her learning that her brother is queer, and the her getting assaulted, like having a bit more closer together, that would explain the unraveling maybe a little bit more, and like even getting to that climax could work just as well. I also think the neighbors didn't really have to be there. There was just a bit too much going on, and those neighbors really didn't do much aside from killing squirrels. But I have no idea what those squirrels are really representing. Maybe except because they are trapped in a cage or in a trap, and they completely actually kill themselves trying to escape. And maybe the squirrel is the brother or something like that. I don't know. It just, the neighbors could have been left out, and like you can just find any other man to bludgeon to death and then explain to your child why that child has a taste for cannibalism. Perhaps. Those were my 6 books that I've read in January. I think that I read really well written books this month. Like, I enjoyed them all quite a lot. I think my favorite is definitely Mayra, in that it was just so eerie, and I like the undertones of something like that, and I like the themes that were discussed. But just this obsessive relationship was so interesting to read, and the haunting of the house, and how the house eventually was revealed to be a beast itself that was in the swamp, that was present in the swamp, as if it's like a crocodile just with its mouth open. And I thought that was really cool, and I really hope that Mayra will become a classic, because I definitely think it can fall into that genre of gothic horror. And if we see more modern gothic horror like Mayra, I definitely think we're gonna have a bunch of excellent books to read. For next month, I'm reading probably more horror, but I've also started reading a book that is sci-fi, which is not really a genre that I've ever really read anything about. So I'm curious to see how that goes. And I definitely want to read more different genres, because as you can see, I read like 3 or 4 horror novels this time, which isn't a bad thing. But I really want to read more different types of genres, and kind of maybe start making opinions instead of saying like, oh, I read everything, which I kind of don't. So maybe it's time to read everything and then hone in my taste. I hope you like this video. I'm sorry Alex isn't here. I know you missed them all so much, and they will be back for the next video probably. But they had life stuff, and I also have life stuff, but I can put my life stuff aside because I am not moving in 20 centimeters of snow yet. Well, hopefully not in the snow, but I'm not moving. So thank you for watching, and thank you for listening, and see you next time, or in the time after that.